I'm here at the state capitol building right behind me, and I'm about to interview Mr. Tony Dell. He's a state representative for District 136, my district, and I want to know, who is he? Thank you, Tony, for being here today with your busy schedule. I know how busy you are. You just give me a little tour around the building and you explain to me what's going on there, even with passing a little bill, and there's a lot of things involved, and thank you for your hard work. But a lot of people in our district, which is myself, that you represent, they want to really know, who really is Tony Dell? Who are you?
Well, I'm a husband, a father, a U.S. Army veteran, a small business owner, and I do tell people that I'm just a normal guy with an interesting job. And, just like a lot of other people in Cedar Park and Lander.
That's, we say that, doing things is important. We know what we're doing, how to do it, but why we do it. That's, I guess, the most important thing we ask ourselves. But why you do what you do? Why you get up in the morning, come to this office, and defending people or standing up people? What you do that for?
Well, ever since I was young, I've been involved in some sort of community service. And it started very young when I was in Cub Scouts and then Boy Scouts. And my dad's an Eagle Scout. I got my Eagle Scout as well. And part of what they instill in you in Boy Scouts is service to the community, the state, and the nation. And it's something that has always been important to me. I'm a fifth-generation military veteran as well, so I guess I always knew I was going to join the service at some point, and that's just an extension of the similar kind of service that I've done at the state or even at the city level.
Do you think it's very hard to create trust and loyalty?
Yeah, well, I think trust is important, right? Because, this current position as a state representative is a position of public trust. And I think it is important that people know where you come from on various issues, and you have to give them a reason to trust you.
But you are also as a businessman, is that right?
That's correct.
And you have your own consulting firm, and you're working as a business person. I'm sure you go through a lot of stuff that, like many of us, we go through, the business, ups and downs, and dealing with a lot of laws, and we don't like to do that. But I know you're a big fan or big supporter of lowering the taxes for businesses. Why you think that's important?
Well, I've always had a limited government approach to things. I'd say back in the 1980s when Reagan was president is when I first got interested in politics specifically. And the philosophy of limited government and lower taxes is something that I've always felt was the right course for the country, trying to keep the government as much out of your business as possible, and knowing that the government's really there to protect our rights, and we're not there to protect the government's rights specifically. So as a business owner, you feel it directly. My business is so small that I'm not even subject to these margin taxes that we lowered. So I'm truly a small businessman, but I know that when you look at how taxes are collected in the state of Texas, you've got the margins tax, which is the tax on business, and you've got property tax, and property tax is really local tax, but sales tax and the margin tax are the two big state taxes. And all taxes get passed down to the consumer in the end. So trying
Absolutely.
to keep things affordable for people is very important.
And one of the questions I always want to ask you is that how you really balance competing interests, like professionally and personally, like with your job is being in the both sides and competing in different areas. How you balance that?
Yeah, it is challenging because you get very busy in this role, and then you've got your business role, and of course there's the family. I've got 2 children that are in school. One's a sophomore in high school, one's a 5th grader right now. And my wife also owns her own business and is involved in the community.
She's also a small business owner, right?
Small business owner, but she's involved with other activities as well. We're both members of the American Legion. She's a veteran as well. We met when we were in the Army. And she's chair of the United Way of Williamson County. So she's on the board of the hospital in Cedar Park as well. So she's very busy. I'm busy. The kids are incredibly busy with their extracurricular activities. So, my number one obligation is really to the family and making sure that the kids are taken care of. And part of that is making sure that I meet my business obligations as well, because I like to be able to pay my mortgage. It's very important to me.
like many of us.
Yeah, right, just like everybody else. So, we've got the same concerns that anybody else has. Make the car payments. My oldest daughter's 16. She's going to be going off to college soon. And just 5 or 6 weeks ago, we finally paid off my wife's student loans. Right? So, I'm glad to do that, but now we're getting ready for the next phase.
Because this is very important, because even you are in this office and you represent many people, but it's still you're facing a lot of problems or challenges that normal people or ordinary people are facing, right?
Yeah, we're just like everybody else. Like I said, it's a normal, suburban family. I got a dog too, so it's the whole deal. And but getting the privilege to come down here and try and influence the public policy debate as well.
Yes. Have you ever failed in anything?
Have I ever failed in anything?
Yes.
Well, yeah. I think everybody's failed in doing something. This is not my first business. I had another small business, and really, it was a great experience for me, because I was just trying to set it up to sell some small memorabilia type things, and to keep it legal, you've got to be able to do all the taxes and all that kind of stuff. So I was working at a different company at the time, but I set up this other small business. I never really intended it to be a primary source of income. I just wanted to make sure that we were collecting taxes and doing all that stuff. But it was a great education for me to set this up, because of the complicated nature that a small business person has to deal with in terms of the Secretary of State's office and other tax filings and all that kind of stuff. And when it came time later to have a business that was going to be my primary business, I had this previous experience. I had trouble closing out my old business when I said, okay, I just need to stop doing this. And it got rather complicated, and I had to hire I think I hired an accountant to help me kind of close out everything with the state. And I thought, it really shouldn't be that hard to take something that was small, intended always to be small, and I had to hire someone to help me close it. Shouldn't be difficult like that. So when I look at some of the things that business owners face, you want to try and make sure the regulatory burden is as low as possible, but still make it so that there's a fair playing field for everybody and that consumers are protected.
But do you think the government, our current government, or in the local or federal level, is structured in the way that they support business owners?
Well, I think it's very different from each level of government, right? And the challenges that various businesses face are different. It depends on what you're doing. I think it's clear that the federal government has promulgated in the last 7 years thousands upon thousands of pages of regulations that have never been approved by elected officials that put a great burden on many businesses. And in my opinion, they've intruded into many areas of the economy that they don't have any business being in. And it's quite a burden on business owners, because in this role I get to speak to a lot of business owners, and they tell me about the impact of these regulations on their business, on their hiring practices, on the hours that they allow their employees to work, and things like Obamacare and how it impacts their businesses. You hear about what do they call them, the 29ers, people that can't work more than 29 hours, and the 49ers, the companies that will not hire more than 50 people, so they're not subject to this. And it impacts not just confusion and cost to the company, but also businesses that are truly unwilling to expand and add more jobs past a certain point, specifically so they're not subject to government regulations. That's not good for anybody, because you want job creators to create as many jobs as possible so people have places to work.
That can be a reason that businesses, they're going to hold off on creating jobs.
There's no question.
Or building business, because they say, if I'm going to face this, why I have to start creating jobs for people?
Right. And so you can see extensions of that kind of everywhere, right? So, we've tried to focus here at the state level, trying to reduce the regulatory burden on businesses. Some businesses are licensed, okay, and some licenses are appropriate to have, where you may have people that are working in industries that could be potentially hazardous to the employees or potentially hazardous to their neighbors by their facilities. And that might be an occasion where licensing is appropriate to make sure people are appropriately trained, things like that. But you have other industries where licensing is put in place by an industry that comes in to this building and says, we think our industry should be regulated more heavily, should be licensed. And sometimes it's a move to try and prevent their competitors from easily getting into the business or staying into the business. And those are the things that you should really
Especially
question.
Austin, I think that there are a lot of startups companies that coming from the Silicon Valley, which is they call Austin the second Silicon Valley. And there are almost 800 startups in the past like couple of months or so. But there's anything that you guys as a representative or a state representative or legislation that can do something for this startup company that eventually they're going to create jobs and bring technology to the state. Is anything going on?
Well, you got to also look at the nature of Texas, right? So the legislature itself only meets once every 2 years for 140 days when we can actually take action and pass bills. So I'm part of a couple of organizations that look specifically at these various business issues to see what we can do to keep the regulatory burden as low as possible and still keep things safe for consumers and for employees. So we're constantly studying those issues, but I think the Uber and Lyft conversation that we just had is a classic example of government
Yes.
trying to regulate things in a way that clearly it impacted employees and companies here because both those
Impacted a lot of
companies.
people. So I heard that are not happy.
Well, there's people on both sides that are either
Unfortunately.
happy or unhappy based on the results of the election, but certainly there's people that definitely did lose their jobs as a result of that. And there's companies that aren't earning income here as a result of it. That's a pretty good example right there.
That was for the company that started here, and they just built a reputation, and now they are gone. And
Yes.
a lot of people they don't have jobs.
That's right. Yeah, I was in a church a week ago Sunday, the day after the vote, and a gentleman came up to me and he said, "My son lost his job last night. Is there anything you can do about it?" And I said, "Well, call the Austin City Council." Now we may take that issue up in this next session, but between now and January, we're not even in session.
What would you tell somebody that right now it actually we call it Generation XYZ, as you know, our generations change. Like the way you grew up, the way you operated like many years ago is different with our teenagers now. What would you say to this young generation who are trying to build this country? What would you tell them? Because a lot of them they don't have the mindset that you and I have like years ago.
Mm-hmm.
What should we do with this?
Well, that's
Well, how can
that's
we
a great
help them?
question. I mean, how can we help them? Well, I think it's important to know that some of the values of the people that are often referred to as the greatest generation, the World War II generation, and others that have come before us. There's no substitute for hard work, and you have to know that people aren't just going to hand you stuff. And
Absolutely.
the sooner you learn that lesson, the better off you're going to be, because once you get into business, it is a challenging arena, as you well know, and you have to be prepared to exceed your customers' expectations, your clients' expectations, and people aren't just going to do business with you because you're really nice. They're going to do it because you're going to take care of them and you're providing something that's of value that they want and they desire. And there's other people that want to do the same thing and they want to do it better than you, and you better be prepared to meet that challenge or else you're not going to earn an income. So I think like in certain parts of the economy, the state, some of us have done pretty well and our kids do pretty well, and you gotta say, hey, look, like my wife and I, we didn't get a nice house in the suburbs just because it was handed to us. When we first met, we were just
You earn it.
well, I guess I'll put it this way. So when we first met, we were both enlisted soldiers in the U.S. Army. Okay, she's an attorney now, but she was not an attorney at the time. And people will say to me, well, you're lucky you married an attorney. I said, I did not marry an attorney. I married a private in the U.S. Army Reserves, and we were both in college. We had an apartment that was incredibly small. I remember one day, we used to take MREs, meals ready to eat, home from the ROTC building so that we could have food. And we were happy to have it. Our living room consisted of a milk crate. We had 2 milk crates. Those were our dining room tables. And when my parents bought us a little dinette set with a table and 2 chairs, we were in heaven.
How long
That was
ago
pretty
was
good. That was back in probably 19 89, 90, 91 back then. And I think there's a big difference between being, I'll say, poor or financially challenged when you're in college
Challenge.
than being in poverty. You know,
Have you ever passed a bill or supported a bill in the House that it wasn't good for so many people, but it was good for all in the long term? How did you feel about that? Have you ever done that?
well, I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I think one of the big challenges that you face
And you
sometimes
can't
is that,
please everybody. That's what I'm
well,
saying.
yeah. So well, I guess you better know that going into it. So that's true, right? But I think when you think of this role and what your role is, we live in a republic. Okay, so the people of Texas elect representatives and senators, and while a citizen may have their opinion or their specific knowledge on an issue, they don't necessarily come to this building and go through all the hearings and briefings and everything else and learn about the consequences of the legislation or maybe some of the unintended consequences of the legislation. And you look at it and say, well, it sounded like a good idea when you started, but and I'm with you, I understand what you want to do, but if you do it this way or you do this, it's going to cause all these other ripple effect things over here. And it's a legislator's job to kind of dig into all that stuff and kind of go deep, not just look at the surface level of it. I'm saying that because that's really our role. But then it's incumbent upon the legislator to come back and communicate to people, hey, I know you wanted to do this, but here's what I learned during the process, and here's why I made the decision that I made. So it's we were speaking before the interview about how an important part of this role is listening and reading. It's a lot of research. But then there's that part of communication where you have to go back and explain to people why you did what you did. And we're expected, and I think it's important to know that my job is to learn as much as possible about these issues to make the most informed decision. What I'll say is, whether or not it was a good decision is not up to me. I try and make the most informed decision. I'll let the voters decide if it was a good decision or not. So, and hopefully they're good at the same time, not just informed.
But with the other side is, how you respect your opponents, how you respect the different version or different ideas that people they have about some issues. Like, you might have something and your Democrat party. I know you respect everybody. I know that about you, but how you do that?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways, and one of the things that's interesting
In politics
about
is very hard.
it can be, certainly, yes. I think in the House of Representatives we have a very collegial body where we work hard to respect all members. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Republican or Democrat. We have members that are self-identified as libertarian. You've got some on the Democrat side that are very far left Democrats. And even though there's 150 members, and that seems like a lot of people, and the House chamber is the largest room in the Capitol, once you get in there, it's a pretty small room because you're all there together and you have to live with each other and communicate with each other. And so I think it's important to be respectful in your communications. You can, what's the old line? You can disagree without being disagreeable. And certainly sometimes our passions overtake us and we don't live up to that particular standard. But it's important to keep an open line of communication with everybody because just simply from a parliamentary standpoint, each member in their own right is quite powerful in terms of the rules of the House and being able to kill legislation or move legislation. So it's important to be respectful to each other because you're also trying to move your agenda. But at the same time, it helps with that listening portion that I was talking about, where if you've got a relationship with people that are opposite of you on a policy, you can have an open dialogue with them and understand where they're coming from. Texas is a very large state. It's very diverse. It's not just Republican versus Democrat. It's urban versus rural sometimes. And in fact, a lot of the battles end up being things like suburban versus urban, or suburban versus rural, or rural versus urban, that cut across party lines. And coalitions form of people from different parties on a particular issue, and then once that issue is dispensed with, that coalition breaks up, and now there's a different group of people working together. And you might be working with someone on an issue today that you were against yesterday. And until you're in this role and you actually see that in practice, that may seem crazy, because you look at Washington, D.C., where they're in complete gridlock,
exactly.
right? Where they don't, I mean, there's Republican and Democrat, and these lines shall not cross, okay? I don't think anybody thinks that's good for the country. I don't know anybody that thinks that's good for the country, the way they operate. Well, we talk to each other down here. When you look at Texas, again, 26 million people, very diverse. You know, we've got coastal concerns. We've got people that are far away in the panhandle. We've got people that have concerns that are directly on the border. We have people that are not directly on the border but are concerned about what happens at the border. We have big city problems. We have rural problems with livestock and agriculture. We've got transportation issues that are not just roads, but we've got some of the largest seaports in the world that have to be looked at. We've got airports. We've got rail. We've got more pipelines than anybody else has. And one of the biggest oil-producing states in the world that brings all kinds of challenges with it. So it's incredibly diverse, and so you better be listening. You know, but so inside the building we try and listen, and sometimes I think the politics of Washington, D.C. spills over into our 24-hour news cycle, and people assume that we're like Washington when we're very much not like Washington down here, and we actually pride ourselves in not being like Washington. We put Texas first.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Are you going to still keep going in politics?
Well, I think I'll certainly be involved in community
planning
service
to run
in
for
some
a
way.
different office, I better say?
Well, I don't have a specific plan, and I didn't even really plan to be here, frankly. I know I'll be involved in community service in some way, whether it's as a state representative or in some other role. You know, I mean, it could be just being on the board of the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, you know, which I would like to do someday. I just don't think that my schedule and position really meets that today. I couldn't do it today, right, for a number of reasons. But I mean, I'd like to see myself doing that someday. Is there some other public office that I'd be interested in? I think I said I didn't plan on being here because I was actually trying to recruit someone to run for this office. Actually, multiple people.
Everything starts from here.
And well, I was on city council in Cedar Park prior to this, but you know, maybe I do enjoy serving in the House of Representatives. It gives me the opportunity to interact with a lot of people in Williamson County and Austin, Cedar Park, Leander, and Brushy Creek. A lot of the legislation that we carry has people's names attached to it. You know, say this idea was brought to us by Chris, or this one was by Amy, or whoever. You know, just folks that said, I have this concern, and can you help fix it? And we try and do it. So that's very rewarding. And right now, I still enjoy what I do, and currently have the support of the voters to continue doing it, which is obviously an important piece of that puzzle. So I'm pretty happy where I am right now.
But you're a very down-to-earth person. Everybody knows that. Why you feel so close to people?
Well,
I know anybody can come here and talk to you. You spend a lot of time with people in community. Is it just this is what Tony Dell is, or this is just the other side of politics?
No, I mean, I think it's who I am, because when I decided to run, people asked me, so how are you going to do that? And I said, well, I'm just going to keep going all the same stuff I went to before. I'll just be a candidate or an office holder, because all these community events and things that I attend now, I was going to most of them prior to being in office. And so, I really do care about the community. I like how we've been moving in Williamson County with the growth. It brings particular challenges, but I'll take the challenges of growth any day over the challenges of decline. Well, you don't want to have the challenge of decline. I mean, look at some of our formerly great cities like Detroit and Buffalo and Rochester, New York, and other places that have gone downhill. Those are not the challenges that I would prefer to deal with. I'd rather say, we need more roads because we have more business. We need more buildings because we have more businesses. We need more water pipelines because we have more businesses. And even on the electric side, we need more utilities because we got more people coming in, more school buildings, all this stuff. It's not easy to deal with, but it's preferable to, oh my gosh, we don't have any jobs. Oh, we can't afford the police force. We can't afford to pay the water bill. Or all our pipes are filled with lead and we can't replace them. like they have in some parts of the country. Rather deal with the problems
Yeah.
we're facing today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you a lot of questions. I know you have a tight schedule. You got many other appointments, but thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. As my representative for District 136, and many other people that can't be here, but I talked to them, and I told them I want to interview you, and they love you. I just want to tell you that people out there, they love you because you love them, and they support you because you support them. And once again, thank you so much for
Thanks.
your
Yeah.
hard work. Thank you.
Appreciate it.